And welcome to the latest episode of the United States of Movie Podcast. It's what makes Mondays worth living for. It's the movie podcast by movie fans for movie fans as we try to answer that unanswerable question, as we try to pick just one movie to represent each state in these United States. As always, I'm joined by amazing co-hosts. First of all, Ryan Sandler, welcome back to the show, the man, the myth, the legend.
Oh man, it's so great to be here. I look forward to this I know we say it every week, but I look forward to this every week.
It genuinely is the highlight of every weekend for me. And of course, our resident filmmaker, our writer, and resident movie nerd, Will Hirsch. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be here. Excited to do our first challenge episode.
That's right. Yeah, we are doing a challenge episode because our very first episode, we went for California. Why wouldn't we? There's only about 4,000 movies to choose from. But despite that, we managed to accidentally all pick LA-based crime heist movies, which is ridiculous considering the size of California and the amount of places that you can make movies. So while I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, she is from California, and she decided that she wanted to bust the myth that LA is the only place that movies are made. So she has joined us for our first challenge episode, bringing 2 movies. But first of all, let's just welcome her to the show. Kari Byron, welcome to the United States of a Movie.
Hello. I'm also a film nerd. I mean, one of my first jobs was in a video store, so I spent a lot of time watching and rewinding movies.
This is why, you were perfect, because I said, Kari and I were just catching up, and I mentioned, I'm doing this movie podcast, and I just threw out the question, if you were on the show, what movies would you pick? Within literally 60 seconds, she sent a list of movies that made me go, oh my God, do you want to be on the show? Because these movies are amazing. And the funny thing is that the list of 10 then became a list of 5, then became a list of 2. And then the next day she goes, I'm changing my mind. And the 2 movies that you picked were what, Kari? What are you bringing to try and take down our champion?
Well, I wanted to do sort of a Northern California, Southern California mix. So I picked Basic Instinct for a modern genre. Well, I guess it's not modern anymore. My youth version of Vertigo, which is Basic Instinct. And that era did an interesting twist on on Vertigo, which is with Basic Instinct, and the Kim Novak became Sharon Stone, who actually lives in San Francisco. So I thought that might be kind of a fun, really long discussion.
It's exactly like Vertigo, but way more horny.
Yes, but with such great outfits.
Oh my God! Stunning!
The outfits are amazing. Yeah. So Kari, being from San Francisco, has kind of brought San Francisco to play. So she's, of course, talking about the 1992 movie Basic Instinct, directed by Paul Verhoeven, starring Michael Douglas, Sharon Stone, Jean Triplehorn. It is from that time. The 2010s have been dominated by the MCU. This is part of the MDCU, the Michael Douglas Cinematic Universe, back in the 90s, where you put Michael Douglas in a movie with an A-list actress, and then you put sex in the middle. So if it's not Fatal Attraction with Glenn Close or Disclosure with Demi Moore, it's Basic Instinct with Sharon Stone. Basically, Michael Douglas just humping the whole of Hollywood, and that's what everyone was like. You want to go see the new Michael Douglas movie? He's going to have sex with somebody else.
Yeah,
with Michael, like all of the movies with Michael Douglas, like The Game, like there's so many. They're so good from that era.
Yeah. I miss that era of like erotic thrillers of the 90s, like Sliver is another one, or like The Sandlot. I don't know.
Classic erotic thriller.
That was
but
hot.
Man, but you meant. I mean, the lifeguard scene alone. Come on. But no, but I mean those like that erotic thriller genre just kind of went away. Like you don't really see those type of movies anymore.
We are going to get into that because we now live in a point in history where movies don't have sex scenes, whereas whole movies were based over sex in the 90s. So we're going to get back to that. The other movie, Kari, that you bought is something that I am so excited to talk about because it's something I've been wanting to do in this podcast, which is representations of a state in a different state, be it an alternate reality, alternate dimension, or alternate timeline. What is the other movie that you brought to the table?
Okay, one that's near and dear to my heart, and probably it's like one of the top movies of all time, Blade Runner.
Yes.
When you said that, Carrie, I mean, like I already like you so much. The fact that you said Blade Runner, I'm like, you are just as much of a nerd as I thought you were. Blade Runner. Oh my goodness, one of the
Set in
greatest movies.
LA.
It's exactly. It's set
Yeah.
in Los Angeles. It says it on a title card right at the beginning. It's a definitive California movie.
I've said that before. I love when a movie just clearly states what state it's in
Yeah.
at the beginning of the film, so you're not
Yeah.
confused.
Well, it did that with Blown Away, like you were saying.
Just said Boston, USA.
USA, just in case you forgot.
Yeah.
Though in this
Blade
particular
Runner is LA 2019.
2019, yes, we're going to the future
Just
of
the
a few
future.
years ago. The Ridley Scott directed movie starring Harrison Ford, Sean Young, Rutger Hauer, Edward James Olmos, Daryl Hannah, and many, many, many others. A truly iconic movie, misunderstood in its time. So Carrie bought two noir movies, basically, to take down last time's champion. The last time we went to California, we decided that Point Break was the most California movie of them all, the 1991 movie directed by Catherine Bigelow, Patrick Swayze, Keanu Reeves, Gary Busey, Laurie Petty. So I tell you what, this is where we're going to start. We're going to start with last episode's champion. So Carrie, Point Break. When I first mentioned Point Break, your first message back to me was, oh my God, I love that movie. So let's talk about your memories of the movie, your relationship with the movie, how you feel about Point Break.
I mean, first of all, it's a babe fest, and it was during like my coming up years. It's Kiana and Patrick, please. I wanted to be Lori Petty because she's so cool. And we also we busted some Point Break myths on Mythbusters. So I've already taken this movie apart for not just its scenes, but its effects and the possibility that you can catch somebody jumping out of a plane. I jumped out of a plane to see if you could do that.
That's maybe the coolest story I've ever heard. So go on about busting that myth. You jumped out of a plane. Is it possible to catch another person when you jump out of a plane?
Well, so a human has a terminal velocity of about 120 miles an hour. And we had to figure out if he dove straight down, could he catch Patrick Swayze? Because if you're just flying like this, it slows you down. But if you go like this, you can get much faster and catch him. So did you not see that episode?
I sit there going, I've watched a lot of Mythbusters that I'm like, I don't think I've seen that episode.
Oh, it was so fun. We did a bunch of green screen with Tori and Grant pretending to jump out of planes. And then I actually jumped out of a plane and I filmed myself the whole time. It was awesome. The funny part is halfway through that episode, I cut my long hair to here and dyed it bright pink. So they had to try to cut around the fact that I looked entirely different from the beginning to the end.
Oh, the editors loved you on that episode.
Oh my God. Well, it was kind of, we kind of liked messing with them because we're like, it's reality. Shouldn't this be real? Like, we should just film it right.
I think that's why everybody, people love Mythbusters. I was just talking to my father-in-law. He goes, oh, Carrie was my favorite on Mythbusters. I'm like, no surprise there. But the fact is that the boys do green screen and you jump out of a plane. You know what I mean?
Okay, that's not how it usually goes. It's just Tori. Here is a little funny thing about him is he will do anything. He will be buried alive. He will be put into a coffin with snakes. He will do anything, but he's scared to death of heights.
Oh man.
That is his one Achilles heel.
See, I'm scared of heights too, but I feel like I would jump out of a plane because heights get to a point where you're like, well, once you're over 30 feet, what's the difference? It's like, either way, it's going to hurt.
See, I'm the opposite.
Like Swayze says, you don't want to jump out of a perfectly good airplane?
Yeah.
I'm the opposite of Tori. I have a fear of everything, so I wouldn't be doing any of that.
But you have no fear of movies, Will. Will knows more about movies than almost anyone I've ever met.
The only thing I'm not afraid of,
He loves Fear, Cape Fear, Fear and Loathing, all the whole Fear series.
I mean, me too.
So, but when you said, that you love Point Break, Carrie, for me, when I think that's the one that I brought to the table last time we did California, and for me, it was the movie that was, to me, as a British guy born in Asia, when I thought California, I thought Point Break. You've got surfing, you've just got
surf noir.
Yeah, you've got the whole vibe. You've got just the way the sun is setting. You've just got Keanu Reeves. For me, what I love about this movie is that it's because we're going to get into the problematic female characters or the way that they are approached in the other two movies. that in this one we have got directed by a woman, and we're kind of shooting eye candy, like male eye candy, because like, you know, Patrick Swayze is just Patrick Swayze. Keanu Reeves in that wet t-shirt right at the beginning. I'm not gay, but a little gay part of me inside is going, these men, they are hot.
It's like, what if you took the entire volleyball scene from Top Gun and just built an entire film around that? Like, why aren't we doing that more?
Yes, with like really cool detectives and like they're both bad boys, and you know we love that.
And Gary Busey.
And Gary Busey, I mean, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what's the scene like? You know, if I say Point Break to you, what's the first scene you think about from that?
Oh, I really, oh my God, why did you just do that to me? Because the first scene was this, like him and Lori Petty making out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the night surfing scene.
Yeah, that was hot.
Yeah. Oh no, but this is why I'm fantastic. I love bringing new perspective.
To quote Keanu Reeves, yeah.
We love.
I mean, that shouldn't have been the first thing I thought of. It should have been like when they're sitting around the fire, like there's so like the fight scene with yeah. No, I actually didn't rewatch this movie, but I remember it really well.
For you, you liked the slightly horny scene when they're out. He's learned how to surf at night. Laurie's sort of shaking. He's kind of he's trying to describe the feeling of just feeling so free. And she's like, you don't need to explain yourself to me. I completely understand. But it's like, yeah, it is. I mean, it's like, what I like about it is that we got into it a little bit last time, is that, you know, is that Lori Petty's character in this movie is in no way a damsel in distress at any point. Even when she's in distress, she's like a caged animal. You know, when you get that video that she's been kidnapped, you know, and she's been gagged, usually at that point in a movie you see some poor woman and she's crying and she's helpless, whereas the look in her eyes is pure murder. She is like absolutely growling at the guy behind the camera, and I'm like, she is a tough character, man. Like that's why I always dug her character, because she's just like so capable, just as capable as everyone else in the movie.
I love that they went against type 2. Yeah, tank, exactly. Yes. And also in the army now, apparently. That Pauly Shore movie that no one saw.
Well, she was also supposed to be in Demolition Man. We got into that. She kind of got like her career. She was one of those ones that got kind of disrupted by that awful movie producer. What's his face? The guy that's gone to jail forever for Me Too.
Are Funklebucks?
Yes, that guy. Is that?
Could talk about 30 different producers, by the way.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah, Lori Petty in this movie, I thought she was so good, so strong. But like, for me, again, so we always talk about on this podcast that part of the joy of doing this is rewatching movies with fresh eyes. And so we were just joking right before you logged on about, you know, how we're watching Point Break again. The last time I watched it was 15 weeks ago. But even then, watching it again, I'm watching it with new eyes. And for me, it's always just even the first 5 minutes of the movie with the music that's playing, the slow motion shots of the guys surfing, that I'm just like, Catherine Bigelow. That's like, for me, I think, where as a young man, I was like, I love anything that Catherine Bigelow does from now on. For me, it was like this sort of stamp for me of just like, look at this movie. There's no movie like it. As soon as it starts, I get all the happy feelings of,
beautiful.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch Point Break. It's so good.
It's one of those movies. I think it's the time when she like really found herself as a director, because if you watch like her earlier stuff like Near Dark, she's really kind of like mimicking James Cameron, because obviously she was running with that crowd at the time, and it's all of James Cameron's actors are in that movie. But then you get to Strange Days, and then she's getting like her style more like down, which is a great movie, but it's still a little rough around the edges. When it gets to Point Break, she's like, okay, I've got my style. I've got like, you know, she's now understands like everything about being a director and a filmmaker, and it just worked so well.
Strange Days was before Point Break?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a great random movie. Ray Fiennes, right? Sexy Ray Fiennes. But yeah, I mean, just opening 5 minutes does all the work for us. You know, establishes Bodhi as just this guy that likes to surf. We barely, sort of almost mystical, because you don't quite get to see him because it's not Patrick Swayze surfing. But then, you know, it's juxtaposition with Keanu Reeves, young, sexy, and amazing at shooting. You know,
you're not going to say the young, dumb, and full of cum line. You had that perfect opportunity. That opening shot, though, like that opening oneer. I know there's like whip pans, but I had to watch it twice just to see him walking through the police precinct,
Yeah.
getting screamed at. I'm like, this is an insane walk and talk setup where they're moving through this office and cameras whipping around, and it's awesome.
That's actually one of the first instances of that, actually. So they had the steady cam. I remember like they talked about that particular scene and how it's very West Wing adjacent. Like the whole of West Wing is walk and talks like that, and they're just going through the things and yeah, I was watching that one as well. But it's like I remember like is it John C. McGinley? Is that right?
God. Yeah.
Him talking about how they would had to do multiple takes of that, and like how it's you've got to time people walking in front of camera and people putting something down in the background. And I know I was just watching that because he owns that scene. That's that whole like. It's the John C. McGinley scene, which is everything you ever see him do in Scrubs at the same time.
Just cranked to 15. I loved it.
Well, he always is, and that's why I love that guy. He's like, who are you playing? Me. I'm playing me in a movie.
You see like Highlander 2, he's playing the same character in that movie, and it's awesome. He's like the only good thing in that movie. It's incredible.
Are they not are they remaking Highlander with Henry Cavill? I think I read that the other day.
I think he just stole the wig off of The Witcher show, and they're just like, well, we got to use this, so they're going to use it for that.
I'm on board.
It's one of those movies that's like in perpetual, like, hey, this is coming out, and
like The Crow.
Like,
They're always trying to remake The Crow. We got so close. You can't mess with perfection, man. That's for me is one of the greatest movies ever made. But when it comes to Point Break, it's there's so much more to it because it's just not a dumb action movie. It's all of that sort of influence that Catherine Bigelow I think has brought to it is that there's a lot of like actual character development. Like people grow, people are interesting. I like Patrick Swayze's character is just kind of the mystical sort of like bodhisattva.
He's just every yoga instructor you've ever met.
he's like
a guru.
He's like Paul Rudd's character from Saving Sarah Marshall, Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Yeah.
It's like, my name's Kunu. What does it mean? Chuck.
Yeah. God, imagine they could have gotten Swayze to do that.
Oh my, that would have been amazing. Yeah. But at the same time, he also has that moment where he's kind of on the beach and he's talking about how, in his mind, like Bodhi, he's like, we're here to represent freedom to all those people that are sitting in their cars stuck in traffic every day to show that the human spirit is still alive. And that's kind of cool that it's the multi-dimensional character instead of it just being I rob banks for money. He's kind of like him and those guys, they're always chasing that rush. They're always chasing that, the endless summer, as Gary Busey kind of calls it. And it's like, he's put this kind of spiritual sort of narrative to it. And I guess my question is to you guys is like, do you find it authentic or do you think Bodhi's full of shit?
I think when I was younger, I probably was like, oh yeah, I'd roll with this crew hard. And I just watching it the other night, I was like, yeah, I still would probably. He's saying some pretty smart things, still relevant to this day.
I mean, I live at the beach in a surf community, and I feel like they believe that. None of them are robbing banks, but they are.
As far as you know.
As far as you know, yeah.
As far as I know, but I remember when 9/11 happened. They said, bring up 9/11, really bring it down. The first thing every single one of them did was abandon their families and go get in the water.
Just gotta surf,
going
man.
down.
Just
I'm gonna be on
surf.
a wave.
Need to connect with the universe, bro.
I'm just glad I wasn't the first one to bring up a 9/11 joke.
I know.
That wasn't a joke.
Sorry, putting that on the list of things I didn't know. Kari Byron's gone with 9/11 reference. There we go.
I mean, joke. I mean, comment.
But jokes come later in the episode.
So Will, I mean, like, I think you're out of all of us, you're the kind of the youngest. When was we talked about it last time? When was did you kind of experience kind of like I did? My first experience of Point Break VHS. You know what I mean? Is like watching it on this little TV and just having my mind blown. Like, what's your first sort of memory of Point Break?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a rental for me. Like, I think it was VHS rental. I can't remember really the first time I saw it. It was probably one of those movies where there was like a half a dozen that would be like on TNT, like in like regular rotation. So I probably like first saw parts of this movie like on TV, and then was like, well, I just want to watch the whole thing without commercials or anything. And yeah, I thought it was awesome. When it comes to like Bodhi's like speech and all that, it's really cool. But also if you stop to think about it, it's like,
pretentious
I don't
bullshit.
know if you guys are like representing like, you know, or like telling people, like showing people that the human spirit is still alive. It's like, I think it's really fun to rob banks and silly masks, which is fine. Like that's okay, bro. You don't need to justify it with like, this has got universal importance. It's like, it just looks like it's a lot of fun. It's cool. Like, don't need to oversell it.
And it's crazy that this came out years before. It was so funny just thinking we put this and Heat, you know, head to head, and how they're so similar in what they're trying to execute and do, but they couldn't be more different in tone and vibe.
Yeah.
But like where this one, there.
That's right. Sure. That was such a great chat. Sure. The first one is like they're all the same movie, but they couldn't be more differently approached.
Right.
Michael Mann, Catherine Bigelow, and then Michael Bay in the middle going.
but Point Break and two also Ambulance is just they're fun movies. Like I wouldn't consider Heat a fun movie, but I mean I love it. Don't get me wrong.
It's fun for us as movie
but
nerds.
Yeah,
it's definitely not like going. Woo!
But Point Break, like you have the dynamic, the relationship between them and all the gang and everything. You could see why Fast and Furious was so successful, taking like, let's just do Point Break with cars.
Yeah.
And that's why the whole inner dynamic worked. You know, everyone wants to be like the cop getting swept up with the gangsters and becoming one of them and falling in love. And
then you were actually, you pointed out there's another sort of similarity with Point Break and Fast and the Furious is they go to that same restaurant on the
Neptune's
PCH.
Net. Yeah.
What's it called?
I was Neptune's Net.
Yeah, you went on a deep dive, so tell us about that.
I was watching Point Break and I'm like, wait a minute. Because I was talking to Kiana, I was like, my girlfriend, and I was like, there's a scene in Fast and Furious where they meet at this exact same restaurant. I'm like, it can't be the same restaurant. And sure enough, it is. It's just, they were both shot there. I'm like, come on. I mean,
Fast and Furious. If Laurie Petty had turned up in Fast and Furious, then we were
she was supposed to play Dom.
It's crazy to think we've then had 9 sequels to that movie.
Can you imagine a universe where we had like 9 sequels to Point Break?
I'm
like,
trying to.
Yes, I can. Yep. Every night.
It'd be phenomenal. Be riding surfboards in space. It's the movie we were robbed of.
Yeah.
For me, it's still. For me, whenever I think Point Break, I always think, and we definitely touched on this last time, but it's the foot chase. The post bank robbery foot chase is still something that I watch all the time, and I'm like, I've seen other people sort of emulate it. I've seen it pastiched, but no one's ever shot it and edited it in a way that's like, for me, basically perfect.
And also, no one's ever picked up and thrown a dog at another person, and then that person drop kicks the dog. I spit my drink out seeing that again because the sound effect of it is so jarring.
Yeah.
And then it just keeps going for another 10 minutes. It's fantastic.
That gets me right here. As a dog person, I'm not a fan of that part.
No, it's so jarring to see. Like he turns the corner and he just hucks this dog at him.
And it's shot so well. It's shot so well because you got real dog on this shot and then you got fake dog for the punt. Yeah. But that's kind of what I mean is that the edit of it all is, and for example, is like that whole scene, that is not Patrick Swayze. That is like his stunt double is doing that. But
it's Ronald Reagan.
It's Ronald Reagan returning to the movie realm, took a break after his time in the White House to shoot Point Break, fact that a lot of people don't know. But that scene, the momentum of that scene just feels like a boulder rolling downhill. Yeah. And I find it one of the best action scenes where what's the action? Running. It's like Tom Cruise. just 2 Tom Cruises running.
That's where he got it from?
That's 100% where he got it from. What, Kari, more from you, more from your Point Break memories. Like when you think of Point Break, do you think of it as an action movie? Do you think of it as a sexy boy movie? Do you think of it? What do you think of it as?
I mean, I saw it in the theater, and I've always been massively in love with anything noir, and I think of it as surf noir.
Surf noir.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm so jealous you saw this in theaters. I mean,
you're jealous I'm much older than you.
and yet look so much younger. So yeah, what was the theatrical experience like? So tell us about that. I mean, like, going to the theater, what was your thought?
As a teenage girl with her girlfriends giggling, eating popcorn and getting ice cream after.
Yeah, tell me.
It was just fun. It was really, really fun. I mean, it took going to college and film studies and 20 years to go back and really appreciate it with the eye that I have now, because back then it was just fun, and now I'm picking apart the scenes, and it makes me want to make movies.
Oh, 100%. So what is your perspective? How has it changed? So teenage Kari went and saw, which one of the boys were the ones that you were like gushing over, but then also now when you watch the movie, what's the things that you appreciate about Point Break?
I mean, I'm very nostalgic for the era before the cell phone, and there was just the feeling of mystery, and the fact that you couldn't make that movie today. It would be so different. I always loved that sort of flawed cop genre, but I appreciate it more now, where I understand, I guess, the flaws that come with age, and there's just much more complexity than I saw back then. Back then, it was really just seeing a cop movie that was very cool, but now I can pick it apart with you guys and really nerd out.
Well, Nate, I like that you bring that up, because we've talked about that before as well, as about a movie that you watched when you were younger, and you're rooting for one particular character, and then when you grow up, suddenly you're like, those kids are being stupid. They should have listened to the parents.
That's wildly irresponsible.
It's kind of like Gary Busey's character. I find I understand more now. Whereas when I'm watching it younger, I'm like, come on, old man. Like, this guy wants to solve the crime. Whereas he's like, Keanu,
he just wants his meatball sandwiches, man. He wants to sit in his car, eat his meatball sandwiches,
and read Calvin and Hobbes.
I was watching that. I'm like, how is he going to operate after eating those 2 sandwiches? I have to take a nap. Like, he's not going on a foot chase. He's going he's gonna be a mess.
Keanu, you go run after that guy. I'm gonna go drive the car.
He wanted 2 of those sandwiches.
That's right.
Give me 2.
Should have gotten
It's
3.
like Basic Instinct. The first time I watched that, Michael Douglas seemed like a character I was sort of rooting for, but now I'm like, he is a vile, sad, weak little man.
Yeah.
So Kari and I, we would text very often. So the guys as well will always text as we're watching the movie. So I just I sent Kari a comment about Basic Instinct, and we realized we're both watching the movie and we're only about 5 minutes apart by coincidence. Nice. So we were kind of live texting the movie, and that's definitely something that's 100%. We're going to get into that in a second, because that is I had exactly the same experience watching that movie. And that's the interesting thing, is that Blade Runner is the same as well. Another thing that Kari and I were texting about, but Point Break is something that, returning to it doesn't really change my perspective on anything. That movie is the same as when I watched it. There's no ooh, that's problematic. I mean, the guys and I have had movies on where they're throwing out the homophobic F slur. They're throwing out, all of these things that are just so casually done in movies of the 90s and the noughties, just casual homophobia, casual misogyny. And then you watch Point Break, and it's like, because you've got that touch of a talented female director, there's none of that. The guys are eye candy, but it's never exploitative. Like, Ryan, I think you nailed it, that it's like the scene from Top Gun. It's like, men are beautiful kind of thing. The female character is strong. The action is fantastic. There's no instance of going, is that character a rapist?
Yeah. There's just not a lot of consent happening here, and then all of a sudden she's like, oh my God, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So let's do it. Let's segue, because we have talk Point Break for. Let's jump into Basic Instinct. An incredible movie. I was so excited that you said you wanted to talk about this one, because Basic Instinct for me is, I think I was chatting with Kari about it, is for me is a movie that is a really great, interesting thriller, completely overshadowed by the fact that you see Sharon Stone's pubic hair. It's like, if you talk Basic Instinct, everyone goes, oh, the interview scene. The cover of the movie is Sharon Stone with her legs crossed, which is such an almost just a slap in the face to what the most fatale of femmes ever, in my opinion. She is an iconic femme fatale. So why did you bring Basic Instinct to the table, Kari?
I mean, it's not because I had watched it recently, but in my mind, I was thinking sweeping, beautiful San Francisco views. I was thinking of kind of the set of it all, and the fact that, Sharon Stone does live in San Francisco, and it brings in this sort of complicated femme fatale of California. I think that the women here are interesting. They're often very beautiful, very complicated, and also I really like the character conversation around the 90s always had these women that played with sexuality, but at the same time, all of the men characters seemed to be out of control, and it was because it was the fault of the woman. Like
Hmm.
it was always like their teasing sexuality or the fact that they were so hot made it so that these men behaved badly. And I just like that conversation. I
Yeah.
think we've come so far in society from that place that I think it's interesting to look back at where we came from.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, like, absolutely, because we're watching the movie and it's like everyone's put on the back, all the male characters are put on the back foot by a woman that says that she likes to fuck. And they're all like, a
She said
woman?
she said the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, that women.
She must be the
They all
killer.
Yeah.
It's absolutely. But the thing is, that is like literally the theme of all those the Michael Douglas cinematic universe movies is Fatal Attraction. The Glenn Close like seduces him with her sexuality and forces him to cheat on his wife, and then he's like the victim. He's not the victim. He caused that situation himself. And then Disclosure, the same sort of thing, is that Michael Crichton book, but like is that Demi Moore sort of seduces him and it's kind of sexual harassment the wrong way. But at the same time, there's that it's very much that gray area that they approach in the movie. It's like, yeah, man, but at the same time, what's that sound? Is that the sound of you tearing off her underwear? You know what I mean? So it's like, that conversation is very much there. How do you think this one handles it, Kari? Because this is one of those movies that, in retrospect, people are like, man, that's a strong character, but also that's kind of messed up.
I did not like Shooter the whole movie. I watched this again the whole time with a modern eye, and I thought, wow, this is very different than I remembered it.
This is a cop who got away with murdering tourists.
Yeah,
Is that
Over and
four
over.
times while on cocaine.
Yeah. Tourists.
Why was he the hero?
Specifically, yeah.
And his therapist is basically covering that up, who he's also having sex with. I mean, it's like
This is like my favorite genre of like movies from the 90s, which is you get somebody like Michael Douglas who's like not an unhandsome man, but he's not, I would not put him at top tier, but every woman in this movie wants to like bang him. And that's such a funny like movie trope, is just no matter like what's going on, every woman is like, that's the most attractive man ever.
It's
And
the Jack Reacher energy. We talked about it in the other episode. Yeah. Like
You got to
every
give it to him. He's got a really good voice.
See,
He's
that's
got-
exactly what I was about to say,
Yeah.
Kari, is what is Michael Douglas's voice? Because I was going to counterpoint with Will, again. I don't know, Will, I like Michael Douglas is kind of bangable. I don't get why. He's not the most, you're right, he's not Brad Pitt, but he's got this weird confidence. He's got that look in his eye. He's got that voice. He's just got that, and something I only recently learned is that for me, Michael Douglas has always been a movie star. But the thing is, because his dad was so famous, he wasn't. He actually was a producer. That while he was, he ended up producing his way into becoming an actor, and like he almost was like, well, I can't be an actor. My dad is. That would be ridiculous. Because for me, he lights up the screen to me. I'm like, it's true though. I mean, he turns up in Ant-Man. I'm like, Michael Douglas, love it, woo, let's go.
He's always just interesting, complex, and flawed. He's never just a flat character. He's always somebody that has a lot of backstory, no matter what he shows up in.
Yeah,
And I think in this movie in particular, that the fact that it's wrapped around this like very like old school crime noir thriller elevates this movie to where some other like erotic thrillers may not. Like this movie had all the twisty turny bits, and even by the end, I thought I'd seen this movie before, but I think I'd only seen parodies and pastiches of it when I was younger, because I was far too young to watch this movie when it came out. And frankly, I think I still am. Because oh boy, this is a steamy one.
I don't actually remember all of the sex, which is funny. Like
It is
I was-
graphic.
wow, I chose this without actually watching it.
That's so funny because like for me, I remember that my experience of the movie and why, like I said, I was excited to talk about it is because my initial experience of the movie was as, I don't know, what, a 15-year-old boy. And I watched it for one very specific reason. There was going to be naked ladies in this movie. But the film nerd in me as a teenage boy was like going, is this movie awesome? This movie's really good.
Paul Verhoeven, Jan de Bont, yes.
That's the thing, and that's what I found so interesting about it. And let's talk on a bigger scale here, because it's like I mentioned earlier, is that sex scenes are something that don't turn up in movies anymore. Whereas in the 90s, it was almost like a reaction against the previous generation of look at us, look how sexually liberated we are. Movies that we go to the theater, movies that make $300 million are sexy thrillers. That's the only thing you get on television right now. And it's like, why have we become so prudish about movies? Or are we being prudes? Were they just being like, almost like, look at the tits, back in the day? Why don't we have movies like this anymore? They still make them.
I know. I'm trying to think. Like, we don't. Like
They just had like Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas.
That was the one that
came
just
out
came
on
out.
Hulu, and you've had this movie like The Voyeurs came out on Prime and things like that. They still make them, but it's just like it's almost like not. It felt like the world needed it back in the day, or Hollywood told us we needed it. It's like, what do you guys think about this? Because I found it fascinating watching this movie. Going, that was in big screen. That was in theaters, and that made $300 million. And well, okay, cool. He's going down on her right now, and this is like, okay, I guess this is happening.
And you don't even see Michael Douglas's dick.
He gets so.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Whereas right now, is it because you've got Game of Thrones? You've got Prestige TV is giving us all the nudity and all the sex scenes and stuff. But in movies, it's like nobody's asking for it. Nobody wants it. They did one sex scene in an MCU movie, which was the Immortals or whatever it was called. I can't remember that one. The Chloe Zhao movie. But and everyone was like, "That's crazy. Why are they doing that? Nobody wants to watch that."
I realize how much we're talking about adult themes, and I just need to get rid of. I am also a role model, and I need to change my background.
Well, I think it's actually kind of a reaction to. I think for a long time, movies that had nudity and sex scenes in it were also just very exploitive. Especially when you get like 80s and horror movies are like the worst offenders of it. So I think
if you bring up Hard Ticket to Hawaii, I'm gonna slap you.
Yeah, greatest movie.
The greatest. No, I just think it's a reaction. I think filmmakers are kind of like, they don't want to fall into the same trap that previous did, where they, and this, I don't think Basic Instinct is a real example of this, but there was a lot of like, let's just throw nudity in because that will sell tickets. And so I think what you're seeing kind of today is a reaction to like, okay, we don't need to sell a movie on nudity anymore.
Right.
And I think there's that. There's also the MC unification of movies. I think there's been a whole generation that have grown up with like those are the biggest movies, which just inherently don't have sex scenes in them, unless they're cool. But I just think like it's kind of a combo of a lot of those things, which is why you don't see it in theaters as much. You see it more on prestige TV.
See, and what I like that you said there, Will, is like, let's say a movie sold on the idea of nudity, right? Which in a way sort of Basic Instinct is. But what I love about Basic Instinct is she is the predator. Everyone else is the prey. There's like you even said, you use the word exploitative. Never like, does it feel exploitative? She is always messing with people's minds. It's like the power she has of manipulation over Michael Douglas's character it's just like a bored cat just messing with like an injured mouse.
Yeah, and she knew like everything about him before they'd even met. So she knew, like, she had him wrapped around his finger, but still, like, even all the twists and turns, I'm like, where is this movie gonna go? She
was a modern woman. She did the Googling ahead of time, but she did
That's
it.
right.
Yes.
I've got a different take on why we needed so much sex in these movies back in that time. It was a really scary time in the 80s and the early 90s where AIDS was running rampant and casual sex was dangerous. And I think that there was something that we like to see in movies where we really like to see sort of a reaction to society, and we couldn't go out and have a bunch of casual sex in that era because it was scary and it was dangerous and there was consequences. So seeing sex without consequences except for maybe
Yeah.
murder, was cathartic
Yeah,
as a
and
release
Michael
for
Douglas
the
has
era.
and Michael Douglas has a line in this where he's talking to his cowboy partner, where they have this weird cowboy vernacular together,
And a cowboy bar
which is
in
never
San
touched
Francisco.
upon. And he's like, next time I'll wear a rubber. And it's just like, Jesus
Right.
Yeah,
Christ, man, like what the fuck?
I was like going, that's such a random
He
joke. And
says
everyone's
it like 2 times.
Yeah,
It was
this
so
cop-
jarring.
This cop in this movie, he's such a horny idiot. Like throughout the entire thing, like it was driving me crazy.
He's a man's man.
Yeah. I'm like, I even said, like, I was watching with my roommates and I was just like, this guy's like the worst cop. Like he's so dumb and just so horny all the time that it's like literally I'm watching the movie and I'm like, okay, I think I know who did it. And I don't think it's that hard to pick up on this.
Yeah,
But this guy is such a moron.
It's clear he's going through some shit. He hasn't had a drink or killed a tourist in 3 months. He's just trying to explore, you know? He's trying
Drug
to get out
addict,
there,
he's
man.
alcoholic.
Yeah,
he's-
just a fucking
sex
rad
addict.
dude. He's
And-
David Duchovny in the late 90s.
and he's a
Let him go.
braggart.
Yeah.
He's a braggart. He's just like, oh, I think it was of the
Fuck of the
century.
century, yeah.
yeah. It was
Again,
like,
it says that 2 times.
I know. And I was like,
was it? That looked pretty. I mean,
yeah, dude, it was 90 seconds of foreplay and 3 seconds of sex, bro.
I like it.
and-
She's like, it was a start.
Yeah. Holy shit.
But let's
Oh,
let's keep going on that sort of realm, because one is like, he is definitely being just, his character is a mess. He's a complete mess. I don't even think he's the lead character. She is.
Yeah.
You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very much
then-
that movie. He's definitely
then-
not the hero.
Then you get the curveball of they introduce Roxy like right at the beginning, who looks exactly like Sharon Stone to a point. I'm like,
Amazing
wait, is that-
casting.
I was like, is that I'm like, am I an idiot? That's not Sharon Stone? Is it Sharon Stone? But then like the double red herring that you think, oh, she's the one doing all of the murders for her, and that goes out the window.
Well,
Yeah.
actually,
Back
no, it
in
goes
that
off
time,
the bridge.
Yeah.
He was vilifying the lesbian was also something
Yeah.
that would happen back then,
Yeah.
because this movie is definitely from the male gaze, and it was impossible to think that they had a relationship that was not for
Yeah.
the consumption of the male gaze.
And they
It's-
went
it's
out
the
of their way to make her look so angry in that nightclub scene. She's just angrily dancing back and forth like
this. It's the cliche of the of the dangerous lesbian. Thing is, talk about that club scene quickly, because again,
amazing.
Kari and I were live texting through the movie.
Oh yeah.
As
Can
much
we
as,
talk
like,
about that V-neck real quick?
that V-neck is sexy, and that's a sexy V-neck.
Yeah.
He looked great in that V-neck without a shirt.
He's the only one I've ever seen pull it off.
He does. He pulls the hell out of that V-neck. I tell you that much. I'm like, I want to look that good in a
That's
V-neck.
not all he pulls.
But it's for me. I was like, is anybody else concerned about the massive lighting rig that is just moving on a robotic arm through the middle of the dance floor? That is just a lawsuit waiting to happen. It's like someone's gonna die.
I went
Yeah,
to clubs
that-
in that era, and that's there. I think we just were a little more dangerous. There was no codes.
No.
Come on, there's no
Indoor
construction
safety.
codes. And the
Yeah.
fact is, most of those clubs were underground.
Men and women in the same bathroom? Not on my watch.
Crazy.
The men's room was lit in that place.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to get into is right at the beginning, the opening scene of this movie is a sex scene that turns into a violent murder. And I want to kind of like ask you guys if because we've got Paul Verhoeven Dutch, Jan de Bont, is he Dutch as well? But we've got 2 Europeans making this movie. And of course, like in Europe, like nudity is like, it is.
It's on commercials. I mean, yeah.
It's just on TV after 9 o'clock. People walk around, they go to the knitting. Whereas in America, people are terrified of a pair of breasts, but they're completely okay with violence. And I'm like, is this Paul Verhoeven? Because we've had RoboCop on the show before. We've talked about, his other movies that he's gone into, really shine a light on hyper-violence and like the idea of understanding America. In this movie, in that opening scene, is he making that point? That at one point we see an ice pick go through a guy's face. Like it's the effect of it is shocking. And still the only thing people talk about in this movie is the sex.
Yeah.
Is he making a commentary on America and American movies?
I mean, yeah, probably.
Explain to the audience.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was
It's a hell of a, that's, I mean, that's how you open a movie too, though. Like, I remember I was texting you guys. I'm like, first of all, I had completely forgotten that Verhoeven directed this, because again, I hadn't seen it until much, much later. And then you see special effect makeup by Rob Bottin, and I'm like, special effects? Like, what? What are they gonna
I said
do?
the
And then
same.
the scene opens. I'm like, oh my God, this guy is violently murdered in the face area.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, no, I said the
but
same thing.
even better than that is the investigation scene that takes place immediately after, where it's I mean, every cop in this is such a dum-dum that they're only focused on the amount of seed that's all over this
ejaculate.
bed.
Yes,
It's so
and everyone's
crazy.
like,
They all
guys,
comment on
get a look at this. And we're like,
Get a
They all
load
started
of this.
Looking at it too. They're
Oh my
like,
God.
"Oh, check it out!" Like,
Oh.
I'm just like, I'll take your word for it.
I had only seen, I think I remember seeing the parody of this, which was National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon 1. So like, I'd seen this movie before ever actually seeing it, but I'd seen the parody first, and that movie rules. Everyone should go see it. It's fantastic.
Well, Will,
I'm glad you brought that
tell
up,
your
because I was gonna
story.
bring it up.
Tell your story about the famous scene, because he was texting realizing that he'd remembered it wrong.
Oh, yeah. So the only scene I this is the first time I've ever actually watched the full movie. But before that, I had seen the interrogation scene, because like everybody in the world has seen the interrogation scene.
It's my lock screen.
Yeah. I think actually, like, my film professor had shown it to us, like,
Frame by frame.
yeah, pausing it. But so that's the only thing I had seen. But also, I'm a huge fan of Loaded Weapon 1. I've seen it like a bunch of times. And so we're coming up to the scene in the movie, the interrogation, and I'm watching it. I'm like, why is there only like, there's only like 3 people, like 4, or there only a few people in here? Why do I remember like there being like 20 people like in this
And, like,
room?
stadium
And
seating.
then it clicked. I remember,
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'm thinking a Loaded Weapon, where there's like stadium seating there.
And it cuts, and they all like
everybody
lean
kinda, like,
over.
yeah, lean into it.
It's great.
I was like, oh, that's
Yeah.
what I was getting it mixed up
And
with.
I think they also do it in another parody movie that I love, Fatal Instinct, with
Fatal Instinct, yeah.
Armand Assante, which is basically a mashup of this movie, Cape Fear, and just basically every genre movie at that time, and it's just hilarious.
I think,
Comedy on Armand Assante.
I think honestly, whoever made Loaded Weapon 1, if they hear that, Will, they'll be flattered. Like,
Everyone
their
should say
version,
it's
their
hilarious.
version is the definitive version of that scene.
And the funny thing about like the sex scenes in this movie, they are almost violent. They're violent themselves. Like, it's very aggressive and graphic, and a lot of like open horse mouth kissing, which is unsettling.
It's like Joe
Yeah.
Pesci kissing from Casino. It's
Oh,
like, you know,
God.
it's like, what are you doing? Why are you
Stop?
from the
I can,
back,
I
open
can only
mouth
get
kissing?
so erect.
But like,
Oh,
well,
man.
there's one scene in particular that we have to talk about, because it's going to cross over with Blade Runner. And it's one that Kari and I were talking about. But it's the scene that I kind of joked about at the beginning. Is that, I'm sorry, did our main character just assault a woman? Like with Jean Triplehorn, it's the scene with Jean Triplehorn. So Michael Douglas's character is being so played with, like, you know, by Sharon Stone, that within 5 minutes of her just messing with him, suddenly he's drinking again after 3 months. Suddenly he's smoking again. And then his first interaction with this woman that he's casually having a relationship, or not. You watch that scene again, and she literally is saying no.
Yeah.
And he ignores that. And
I
it's,
screamed, "Yikes!" Like I was alone in the room, and just out loud, I was like, "Yikes! No, no, no!" Like,
yeah.
And she
For
even
real.
addresses it immediately after. She's like, that wasn't making love. That was like, but they never explicitly state like, oh shit, that was sexual assault, brother. You can't
Yeah.
do that. Like,
And
they
that's
just
just-
never really glaze right past it.
a straight up scene in the movie where everyone's just like, oh, okay. Like, it's
And then
not-
they're like laying together afterward, and she's just like, ugh, it's so
Horrifying.
gross.
It
It's
was-
so
it was-
gross.
yeah. That was one of those things where I don't remember that, and when I went back and watched it, I was like, okay, this movie is very different. It would not play now.
Mhm.
It would not play now.
Yeah.
It would
He
just
would not be a hero character. He's the villain.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think, but I don't think they're saying he's the hero. I mean,
He's the anti-hero.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, you know, I think going Verhoeven, looking at his movies, it took people 25 years to understand his Starship Troopers. Like, people completely missed the point of Starship Troopers, going, this is the creeping idea of American fascism. Everyone's like, oh, that's that Bug movie. And it's like, you watch it now, you're like, This guy was so far ahead of it, and like the way
I'm gonna have to watch that again.
Oh, you Starship Troopers.
Wow, yeah.
Oh my God, Carrie, we'll do it. We'll do live text with each other because he predicted the future. The idea of citizenship being service, the idea of, like there's a very real reason why the blue-eyed white, like white proto-fascist lives in Buenos Aires in Argentina, where all the Nazis ran off to. It's like it's very much like a commentary on the creeping fascism, whereas like 80s was the excess of 80s and capitalism with a capital C. That's why I think, because as much as Showgirls is just Showgirls, I think there's more to Basic Instincts than just what people think about. That's why I was so keen to talk about it, because it talks about the sort of the powerful woman, because it talks about the threatening nature of a sexually aware woman to sort of straight men, the danger of a bisexual woman or a gay woman. And then the idea of, like I was saying, is everyone's fine with the violence, but everyone still talks about the nudity. I think that Paul Verhoeven was making a bigger point with Basic Instinct. And I think that's why I still agree that, like, he's like going, no, this character's he's terrible. He's terrible.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up Showgirls, because this is the same writer-director team.
Yeah.
Like, it's Joe Esterhaus again, and it's so weird because it's almost like they learned all the wrong lessons, like from Basic Instinct, and put all the stuff that didn't work in Showgirls.
I really doubled down on that one.
Yeah, which is an insane. He's also trying to make a commentary in that movie, but whatever it is,
no one's figured that one out. In 50 years, we're all going to realize and go, Paul Verhoeven's a genius.
Yeah. The dog food scene makes sense now. I got it.
Well, I think it's the same. The Barbie movie just came out, and I think that all of a sudden the studios are all like, we need to make movies about toys.
Yeah,
and they completely missed the point of why that movie was successful.
Yeah,
that's a great point, because the article came out like 2 weeks later. Barbie's heading towards $1 billion at the time, and Mattel's like, we're going to make 11 toy movies, and I go, I think everyone was enjoying it because of the female empowerment and the commentary on the patriarchy, but sure, let's make a toy movie.
Hasbro walks, the executive at Hasbro walks up to a whiteboard, writes down Battleship where the S is a $sign, drops the pen.
I'm thinking My Little Pony is going to be weird.
Oh, dude, I would watch it. The My Little Pony show.
Yargos Lanthimos is
I will say,
Pony.
Because I have a daughter about the same age as Carrie's, but this is like go back 10 years ago. I'm in Singapore, and she was watching the My Little Pony show, and I'm like, just me, I'm dadding. I'm like half asleep on the bed while she's lying against me watching it, but I'm listening to it and going, this is actually quite funny. And then I started watching the show, so actually I'd be up for. I reckon they could do a banging My Little Pony movie, because that was actually a fun show.
They could get Paul Verhoeven back. I mean, come on, let's do it.
That's the movie we need.
Let's also talk about, does anyone actually know what happened in the movie? Because in the last 20 minutes, I said to Carrie that I remembered the movie kind of ending with the twist of Roxy and Roxy's car crashing. Right. I didn't remember the extra 35 minutes of the twist on twist on twist on twist. I mean, the weird thing is that every character, so we've got Jean Tripplehorn, we've got Roxy, we've got Sharon Stone, and we've got the former, so Sharon Stone's like mentor that she hangs around with, who murdered her family without any explanation. Roxy murdered her family without any explanation. Jean Tripplehorn murdered her family and people with no real explanation. And then Sharon Stone is kind of a murderer with no... All of the female characters in this movie are murderers?
Yeah, what was your question?
So it seems to make sense.
Yeah,
the thing about it
hard to follow for me.
Is Sharon Stone manipulating all of it? Was she the murderer the entire time? Did Roxy kill the guy at the beginning? Did Jean Tripplehorn stalk what's-her-face back in the day? I got to the end of the movie and they show the ice pick underneath, and I go, what does that even mean?
I think and
who killed who?
Is Sharon Stone a time-traveling writer? Does she travel back into the past and write the stories of the future? What's going on?
Yeah,
it's a time cop situation on our hands here.
That could be the plot of Basic Instinct too. I don't know. I'm not going to watch it, so I'll know.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
God.
think
And then
I did watch it. I remember nothing.
when they're investigating the woman that murdered her family, they're showing Michael Douglas the photos, and they're so fucking graphic. Like,
Yeah.
why would
like,
you need to show that? Like, it's just a kid like on the ground with his neck, and he's just like, how long do I need to lay here? It's
Yeah.
just you don't need to like. That's the extra bit of excess that I love so much.
The last 20 minutes was a confusing, confounding amount of twist,
and then
twist.
He goes to her house, and she's like, "Well, my book is done. Get the fuck out!" Like,
I love that part. I
it's
actually
great. You're like,
really
all right.
love
And he's
that. Was
thrown.
fun. She's like,
Yeah.
my research is done.
Like,
I told
he's
you.
like, wait, but the fuck of the century. She's like,
You are dismissed. Exactly. Like, get
and
out.
then he's reading her book, which is dictating to a T the future of which happens. It's just, how does that? How?
Yeah. And he suddenly puts it together, and even I'm watching the movie going, what? He starts running at the building and screaming for his partner.
Well, because it says he runs after his partner in the elevator. It's like, it's saying like, it's like if you've ever seen that John Candy movie Delirious, where he's a writer who gets a concussion and he wakes up in the daily soap opera that he writes, and everything he writes then happens to come true. It's basically just that.
Have you ever seen?
It's just kind of predictable how that character would act, and she just spent so much time researching him to his core, literally, that she knows exactly what he will do. It's just like, of course he will. Yeah, I'm gonna write this. And then he does it because maybe he read the book and it's he can't even help it. He can't even help but do what she says because she's been manipulating him to do exactly what she wanted the whole movie.
Yeah. But then you get the extra twist where you think it's Jean Triplehorn who's been stalking Sharon Stone's character through college, and they hooked up once, and she's a lesbian. Oh no.
But she did stalk, right? She did though.
I don't know. It's
yeah, the movie ends before like it actually
I thought they were in on it together. Like they both share that exact same story verbatim to Michael Douglas. And even he's like, it doesn't matter. I had sex with both of you ladies.
You know, it's a real star-making turn by Sharon Stone. So, you know, we'd seen her a couple of years before, in Total Recall with Paul Verhoeven, where she had played another femme fatale, where she did that incredible turn of suddenly she was just scary and like, you know, going up against Arnold Schwarzenegger, a literal just slab of a human. But you believed her. And it's like, so I was sort of getting into this, that when they were looking into sort of, you know, casting, they were going along other sort of like, you know, even famous names like Glenn Close and things like that. But is that Michael Douglas was a little concerned about the casting of Sharon Stone, that he's like, I need someone to share the risk. You know, I'm getting into this movie and it could be controversial. I need someone that could sort of take the hit with me. You know, well, one, she steals the movie too. It is her movie. But three, I think this is kind of reflective almost of like the female empowerment of the movie, and also just reflective of the time, because she got paid $500,000 and Michael Douglas got paid $14 million.
What?
Didn't even see his dick.
But the thing is like,
without her, there is no movie. Oh my God, that is horrifying. I did not know that.
Yeah. He's talking about share the risk. I'm like, bro, maybe take that $13.5 million extra and go, well, I'll just drown my tears with my $100.
Right.
Oh my God.
Right? So that's like, that's that thing, is like, because it's weird to think, because no one thinks Michael Douglas when they think Basic Instinct. They always think Sharon Stone.
I think Wainwright.
I do think Michael Douglas as well, but I don't think that he had, I feel like without her, that movie wouldn't be what it was. Like her power drove the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like it's like, for example, the juxtaposition of, if she is naked in that movie, she's not vulnerable. Other people are. I mean, it's that level of, she is so powerful even when completely nude, that I'm like, her character, I think is just, I think, the definitive femme fatale. Like when we first started talking about it, I'm like, I've never seen a character like that before that is scary. And the looks that she has is like, okay, she's sizing this guy up, or she knows this guy inside and out. And the fact that even when she's like being performative, she knows she's being watched. And we really need to talk about the fact that no one locks their doors in San Francisco, but she's changing, but she has.
How'd you get in here?
she has the power while being watched changing. It's a really fascinating thing. But yeah, I was texting going, oh, it's 3 times now someone's walked into a house. 5 times, 8 times. Kari, this is getting ridiculous. Like,
San Francisco wasn't that dangerous in the 90s.
everyone
right,
just strolls into people's apartments.
She is such a predator in this, but she's incredibly intelligent too. Like, they established that early on, that she's got this degree and she's
and $100 million. She's rich.
Yeah.
She's smart.
She maybe killed her parents and wrote a book about it. Who knows?
Yeah. There's that house, man. What a great house.
House says she has multiple
Vincent, she has a house, which, I mean,
2 Lotuses, 2 of the same car, one in black, one in white.
The Lotus Esprit. Oh, what a car. Carmel by the Sea is where that house was. It was set somewhere closer to San Francisco, whereas it's actually about an hour away. But that house, I mean, also her outfits, the fashion. Every time she turns up, she looks like so cool.
Because she's Kim Novak. They're trying to make her Vertigo. They're trying to emulate the scenes of the windy roads and the sets, and they really want to make her that, like, there's definitely an homage kind of there.
That's awesome. Yeah, she looked fantastic. I mean, everyone in this movie in general looked so good. Like the way it's shot. I mean, you get the scenes where it's taking place in her house, and you get like the same thing they do in Blade Runner, the reflecting of the water on the ceiling and everything.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I was noticing how often they use that trick,
which geographically made very little sense for how you see that.
But it's so often light is being bounced off things, and it's moving, and it's moving on their faces, that I was like,
you see like streaks across their eyes. It's such a noir take, but in color, you know.
Well, okay, perfect time to then let's segue, because if we're going to talk noir, let's talk about one of the greatest. It takes just the classic noir, just detective, trope, solve a problem thing, and puts it in, to me, the greatest production design in the history of ever. So we'd been watching Basic Instinct coincidentally at the same time. So I texted her that evening when I was about to watch Blade Runner. I go, hey, do you want to watch Blade Runner? And text each other, oh my God, this is the best movie ever made, every 5 minutes. And I was watching the movie. I was joking with Mrs. just now. Like, I was taking notes just now, and I started gushing out loud. That's what I do. I'm watching Blade Runner going, oh, this movie's so good. Oh, look at that. That's amazing. Oh, that shot is so good. It's just
the iconography and like the texture and the atmosphere, like everything about this movie is just, I want to, like, the only thing that is crazy to me is that people still drive cars in this congested, like, somehow LA is less congested now than it is in 2019. It's
they fixed traffic. You know how they did that? Replicants. That's how they did it.
Well, that's kind of what we do with the AI taxis now. So it's kind of, I chose this movie for several reasons. One, because it's one of my all-time favorites. Like, when I grew up in the 80s as a latchkey kid, so television raised me, and so I love movies. And when I had to go traveling around the world before there was the internet and streaming, I brought my camcorder and a tiny little tape that I had recorded Blade Runner on. So whenever I was lonely or like sad, or because I was traveling for about a year, I would just like put in some headphones and watch Blade Runner really tiny on this little screen, because that was my comfort food.
The way Ridley
so much. Neuromancer was the first book that I read where I felt cyberpunk science fiction, and when between that and Blade Runner, it was like these were formative moments for me. So first of all, favorite movie, set in LA, so much. I mean, I feel like I'm giving a bone to a bunch of film nerd pit bulls, because like it's so much to tear apart. Like this podcast is going to be like 9 hours.
I had to ask Ollie which cut to watch. But I think the first time I watched this movie, I bought it on a bootleg VHS at a garage sale, and I thought it was really bold of Ridley Scott to like cut halfway in between to show like a little girl's quinceanera. I was like, that was really threw me for a loop.
That's the unicorn scene. That's the theatrical release, I believe you're watching.
What's the messaging here?
I watched the director's cut. I have the final cut as well. But have you guys
ever... I think the only difference is the color grading on that.
There's a couple of scenes. They also, for the final cut, the actress that is Zora, the lady with the snake.
Snake lady. Yeah.
They brought her back 20 years later and recreated the scene. So the scene where she's crashing through the glass in slow motion, I think originally was done with a stunt lady. That at times you can tell it's not Zora. So they got the actual actress and they recreated that scene. I've watched them side by side. I don't know how they did it. That's the only thing that's different in the final cut, really, apart from there are some micro things. But that scene is shot for shot recreated, timing recreated, but they actually took the actress 20 years later and made her do it. That is, they say the final cut is Ridley Scott's, the one that he had total control over, whereas I watched the director's cut. Like, so Kari, did you watch your version on the camcorder?
I actually, that camcorder's a little dead at this point. So I did watch the original version though, because that's the one that I fell in love with. And I also, one of the other reasons that I chose this movie is because it's that fear of technology and AI. And I feel like that is really current of the time right now, that we are in the middle of a writer and actor strike because studios want to take actors, scan their bodies, give them 1 day's pay, and then just make AI versions of them in perpetuity into the background. And it's sort of this whole AI slave replicant thing where all of a sudden they rebel. And I think that that's the fantasy right there, is that these background characters are going to rebel and that we're going to have to kill them all and go back. Human background characters.
Write that down.
I know there was a lot of parallels that I'm drawing here.
100%. But also,
I feel like that uncanny valley, like that we're crossing. It
just doesn't work.
So much here.
I mean, I'm sure the tech will get obviously better and better, but it's just so lifeless and soulless. And just seeing this movie and seeing all of the practical effects and the miniatures, as a kid, I was obsessed with movie miniatures. I love them so much. And even seeing like the polish on Blade Runner 2049, it was still just missing that tactile feel of this like miniature world that they built for the original.
It's like the first time, if you like, I recommend doing it is watching, if you ever get the opportunity and you've got a big enough TV and you've got it, is watching like a 4K version of this movie, because that opening shot, like, and you're getting into it, Ryan, perfectly, but that opening shot of just Los Angeles, and you've got the fire things sort of shooting up, and when you get into it, it's a massive miniature. They've got actual lights in. That's why it looks so good, is they're using such a combination of effects that are all real sort of effects. So the flame goes off and it lights up the city below it. They've thought about it, that it just, in those first 5 minutes, I sent a picture of that moment to Karen and I go, oh, look, it's already better than 99% of all movies ever made. And we're in the first minute and a half. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that for me is why I love watching Blade Runner. It teaches me that, you know, people talk about it, is that when you have restrictions on budget or restrictions on time, or just restrictions of the time you are making a movie, it forces you to be incredibly creative, to sell something, to sell an effect. And the fact that Star Wars in 77, with what it did with the Death Star and with that whole sort of thing and the special effects and the way that things look, and then Blade Runner in 82, there's still two movies that look better than movies made today when they bust out CGI. It's tactile. You can feel it. You can almost smell it.
Even when he's down, like when you get down to the gritty, like the street level, all of the signs, all of the grime on the streets, like the people, everything, like every square inch of that scene is just packed with like detail.
All the way to the back. Yeah, there's signs and there's things and there's umbrellas or helmets or glasses. At no point do you go, oh, that's a pair of Oakleys. You know, like everything in that movie has just been going, how would they do it? And I also kind of like the, you know, like Kari, you were joking about how it's the future, but everyone's got a cathode ray TV. You know what I mean? Yeah. But it's the one thing I want to aesthetic of, at some point in our past, these two dimensions diverged.
I love that
future past tech, which I love. Big clunky buttons. Clunk.
Yeah.
Clunk. Oh, give me a big clunky button any day.
If you've ever watched the show Severance on Apple TV, they do a phenomenal job, and Loki too, to the same way. They have this tech from the 80s, but it's supposed to be futuristic, but it's still very analog.
Mm-hmm. Like DOS.
Yeah. But my favorite thing as a graphic designer, like when he's analyzing this tiny photo, he just feeds it into the thing and he zooms in like 1,000,000%.
Right.
Like that would be just a tiny pixel. Come on, that's crazy. Yeah. But it looks so cool. It looks so cool.
That's exactly the thing. I wanted to talk about that. So, you know, we have what the world when they think science, they think Kari Byron. You know, putting the science in science fiction.
Yes.
Like what you know, in Blade Runner, what are the things that you find dope, cool, awesome, sciencey? What just gets you excited about Blade Runner?
Well, for one, I have always been fascinated with the relationship between science fiction and fiction, and I always feel like one drives the other, and we invent things that we were inspired by in science fiction. You know, from Star Trek to creating our little cell phones that we're glued to now. I mean, it's there was predictions of where we are now, but it's almost like people watch Blade Runner and went, oh, let's create more AI. Like it's almost a prediction, but so long ago that you kind of spend the whole movie going, oh yeah, that actually came to fruition. That too, that too. Like we can clone things. Oh, we can do that. We can make human emotions on a robot.
And we'll do it right this time. They won't come back and kill us. Like we'll fix the problems.
James Cameron's like,
ridiculous.
oh no.
Yeah.
I welcome our robot overlord
That's right.
Skynet.
Yeah.
We're cool. We're
Yeah.
cool.
I mean, I saw a clip from Japan, I think, of, you know, kind of like, you know, you get all these Boston Dynamics clips, you know, which really do remind me of RoboCop now. But like, I saw something that I was like going, oh my God, that is so Blade Runner that I can't believe they're doing it. But it's research and they're programming their sort of things. And in the background is their robot that they're programming. And it's a female robot holding onto a pole. It's like, it's literally robot pole dancing. And I'm like,
Getting an
we're at that
insight into what
point.
the engineers want to make. Yeah.
It's wild that you know, 2019 Blade Runner 2023 where we are, no, we don't have spinners flying through the air and we don't have these mega cities and we're not off world, but we are making robot pole dancers and pleasure models and all this kind of stuff. It's wild that so much of technology and science, be it like VHS and Betamax and it's Blu-ray and stuff, it's always been driven by the most base instinct, the most basic instinct.
Hey, way to bring it full circle.
I had a question about the replicants. Obviously, they analyze them, and there's the different types. You've got the combat replicant. You've got the guy who can lift heavy things off world. You have the pleasure bots. Why are they also just incredibly like powerful? Like,
well,
they can also
Don't kink shame.
yeah,
Don't
like,
kink.
no, I'm just saying like, yeah, they're all independent, powerful women, sure, but I mean, they're like insanely strong. Like they could just break a person, and like, why would a human program that? That's
right.
like...
And I know it's almost like, yeah, but that's, I guess, the whole point, I guess, is they created the Nexus 6, you know, more human than human. That's the Tyrell way. They've created the Nexus 6, which is like they are as intelligent as the people that created them, which seems stupid. Personally.
Again, no, what's the worst that could happen?
That's why, I mean, that's that whole, you know, conceit of the four-year lifespan, which is like Blade Runner is a movie. I'm again watching it for only the 100th time. And I'm watching it going, this is a movie just like its sequel, actually. Denis Villeneuve nailed it, but it's like, it's a movie that feels like it's moving at glacial pace, but is moving very quickly.
Yeah.
I can't believe, you know, because much like we had the Alaska episode, Ryan bought this movie. It was 90 minutes long, but after 10 minutes, I was hoping it had been 45 minutes. By the time it's 90 minutes, it felt like 10 hours. This is the exact opposite. It's a movie that is just, at times, you know, I understand why they made the theatrical version with the voiceover, because there is times that he's just sitting in the car and observing. And but for me, I'm like just soaking in the world. But I just realize is the movie goes, scene, done. But at no point are you in a rush.
Yeah, I always remembered it like being a long film, and I was even I'm like, all right, I'll watch this last, because I know it's long and it's a bit slow, but you're right. I mean, it fucking goes.
I think my theory on it was that any sort of classic gumshoe whodunit, you know, has the who did do it, and sets up, and they have scene, action, and then the final, we have it. In this case, because he's having to take down 5 replicants, because one of them got killed, but so that we get all through the movie is him dealing with Leon, and him dealing with Zora, and him dealing with Pris. So we get sort of other end scene. So I think that's kind of my theory as to why it happens like that, is that It's never in a rush, but the cool part is he gets to have those moments
Yeah.
over and over again, and it builds to that maybe one of the greatest scenes I've ever seen. But Rutger Hauer in the rain, you know, it's just gonna, all those things, the things that I've seen, the Tannhauser Gate, and it's gonna go like tears in the rain. I'm watching that, and I think goosebumps every time watching that, going, that is a movie scene. Because I always say that movies live forever. That's why I love movies. But that scene, even now thinking about it, I'm actually getting tears in my eyes, because I think it's just, that for me, just wow. Name any other scene more iconic than that. It's almost impossible.
You know,
Yeah, I
funny,
mean,
you mentioned.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, funny thing is you mentioned the detective noir aspect of this movie. Something I didn't realize till years later, and actually my film professor pointed out. My film professor worked on this movie, so I have kind of a personal connection. He was one of the model builders who helped build the cars.
Nice.
And something he pointed out to me that I didn't realize is this isn't a detective movie. There's no mystery he's solving.
Yeah.
There's no at no point is he like putting any clues together, or he's assassinating these characters. That's all he's doing.
Well, he's retiring them. He's retiring them.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. I forgot the corporate mandated. Yeah. But
I love it. But you're right. This opens with like the text scroll too that explains like they're called replicants. It says the whole
it's
thing.
actually the second movie is the mystery movie that actually has like something to uncover, which I thought is so interesting, because I always think of this as detective noir sci-fi, but there's nothing he's solving. So I think that also
he's
kind of
solving himself.
Yeah.
He's going through, he starts out a robot himself, where they talk about him as just a cold-blooded killer, and he's finding that he's like, I can't shoot a woman in the back. I know she's a replicant, but I still have that feeling. You know, he's slowly solving himself and becoming human himself as the robots have become human.
But you're right, and I love all the little you say it's not a detective thing, but or a crime noir, but like he's using all of the breadcrumbs to get more information. Like when he's when he gets to the first replicant, the woman with the snake, he's using all that information. He's got the scale, the picture, and everything. And then he goes backstage, and Harrison Ford puts on the most insane voice I've ever heard to try and pass as an effeminate journalist.
I'm here. He's part of the union. He's making sure no one's being exploited.
What voice is that? And then halfway through,
it's the nerd voice.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. He's like, you'll be surprised what people will do to see a naked lady. Sometimes they'll walk into the San Francisco house while they're not looking. Just staring at them.
Crazy.
Have you ever seen Basic Instinct?
God, that voice. I had to write that down. I'm like, Harrison Ford's sissy voice?
But also, I mean, and we touched on it in Basic Instinct, there is a very similar scene in Blade Runner where, like, you know, Harrison Ford's character's been thrown off and he's all over, and then Sean Young's character has discovered that she's not human, she's a replicant as well. And there is that scene where it's weirdly, interestingly problematic of he sort of dehumanizes her and says, doesn't let her leave and says, kiss me and tell me you love me, and this whole kind of thing. And it's a scene that, like, you're watching it, and I think what makes the extra level on top of that is that she actually isn't human. And it's the whole question of Blade Runner is, what does it mean to be human? I think, therefore I am, as Pris says, right? And in this case, it's a problematic scene which has the extra lens on top of it of she's a replicant as well. I actually got lost down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out how to talk about that scene. What do you guys think?
Same, because he's like trying to maybe prove to himself that she's more human than robot, or prove to her that she actually is human and it's okay to have those feelings, but at the same time, as a male role, forcing her into that, almost like mansplaining to her that she has to find those emotions. It was a lot to unpack.
Yeah. I was like going, man, this is a really complex scene. Guys, what did you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, that whole dynamic between the two of them, and it's a shame they kind of use that as a through line in the sequel. I don't think the Legacy sequel, I think they could have just done something totally new, but the whole relationship between them, where he knows she's a replicant, but he's trying to make her more human, and then he tries to rationalize or discover whether or not he's a replicant, maybe.
I like
I don't believe it.
Yeah,
either.
no, neither do I. I mean, I think the sequel fixes that one, but
Yeah.
the other part being is, but no, let's talk a bit more about that scene though, because it it hits strange when you watch it, but it doesn't hit strange like the Michael Douglas scene hits strange. Like I said, there's the nuance of it, the science fiction of it makes it almost like a bigger question. And it's almost something that I didn't notice younger because so many movies did it. You know, James Bond, walk in, slap a lady, have sex. You know, it's like that's how movies were made back then. It's like you watch it now through the 2023 lens and you're like going, man, this is the movies we used to watch? This is crazy. But like that's the subtlety of that particular scene. I find like does it make Deckard a villain or not? I mean,
I mean, it's different. It's different. They're both struggling, but he said, "Kiss me." He didn't Basic Instinct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't Michael Douglas her. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a good point too. I mean, he's like got this in this position of power, and this is like he's had this job where it's his sole purpose to go out and retire these replicants, and he knows she's a replicant, but he doesn't want to do the one thing he's like been programmed to do.
Oh, I love the way you put that. The been programmed as well. Ooh, Ryan, you've tickled my little brain there. Let's talk just a little bit. Let's just gush about the movie. Like, for example, the technique that they use to whenever someone is a replicant, the light going into their eyes, they would bounce very small light off a mirror, off camera, into the eyes. That, like, it's
Awesome.
it's amazing. I just like this movie. It looks incredible. Like,
and it's such simple, practical work that they did to achieve what still looks phenomenal. You know,
it's the cinematographer. Is it Jordan Cronenweth?
Yeah.
He won awards for this. The thing about it is, like, and many people regard him as maybe the greatest cinematographer of all time. And the thing is, I was getting into him, and I'm like, I haven't seen that many movies. He did Buckaroo Banzai, which I haven't seen. I feel terrible about that. Peggy Sue Got Married. It's like I had to go back in time, and there's so many movies I haven't seen because I was, again, the whole fresh eyes thing, the cinematography in this movie, the lighting, the production design, the camera placement, the everything of it defines the cyberpunk. It created cyberpunk. It created the science fiction genre. It's been ripped off a million times and never hit it. And I'm like, it's, I guess what we've talked about it on the show before, Kari, but the idea of a perfect movie where, you know, the Ferris Bueller's of it all, but it's the combination of the right director, the right writer, the right actor, the right time. Blade Runner is all of those things, but then it wasn't appreciated in its time. It's only now appreciated by us at this level decades later.
And neither was the new one either. That movie didn't perform well. Like, people.
It's so funny that, like, this franchise, you know, like every single entry in this franchise, whether it be like the movies or like video games, everything flops. Like, these have never been successful, and yet Hollywood keeps like, well, what about another one? And
Thank
it's
God.
like, it never made any money.
Denny Villeneuve's son.
Best, it keeps coming back.
They do it for the hopes that someone with a fledgling movie/geography podcast will talk about it.
Because Denny Villeneuve's son actually said, "Dad, you've made the sequel," because he was intimidated to do the sequel to Blade Runner. And his son says, "Dad, you did it perfectly. You made a movie that got incredible critical reception and made no money. You've made the perfect sequel."
Now he's making. Then he'll work on a Marvel movie, and his career is fucking toast.
Yeah, he wants to make Dune 3. Denny Villeneuve. I'm like, we've talked about trying to do Prisoners on the show and stuff like that. That guy, him and Roger Deakins together is absolutely magical. All right, guys, let's get into it because I think it is actually going to get interesting.
Well, I had one more thing that, guys, James Hong is in this movie.
Yes,
and I was thinking, like, James Hong could have easily fit into all three of these movies. The man is a chameleon. He looks exactly the same in Blade Runner as he does currently.
That's the thing.
Yes,
that's what threw me off, is because clearly he's got aged makeup. Because it's always thrown me off is that James Hong, my introduction to James Hong was Blade Runner. So then he keeps turning up in movies, and now he looks the same as he does in Blade Runner. I'm going, is he immortal? He's
a replicant.
He's a replicant. Oh
Yeah.
man! Shout out to James Hong. If you get a chance, listen to his podcast, Hong Like a Horse.
If that's not a real podcast.
Is that real?
No.
Oh my god, I was putting that on my list.
I was
Subscribe,
about to subscribe.
God, that's the shirt. That's the shirt.
Just James Hong winking and Hong.
Oh my god. Yeah, well, let's get into it. Like we like to do in this movie, in this podcast, is we try to find the movie that sort of defines California. As much as like Blade Runner is amazing. I'm not, it's predicting the future of California, perhaps, and I do something that Blade Runner does about California. I think that Point Break and Basic Instinct do not really do.
Says Los Angeles right at the beginning.
It says Los Angeles, but also the idea of multiculturalism.
Yeah.
So California, especially, you go to places like Los Angeles, like San Francisco, you go to San Diego, you get parts of that city that the signs are in Korean, the signs are in Chinese. That it's like you have a real mix of people. And that's the one thing that Blade Runner has that the other movies don't have, right?
Well, in Basic Instinct, they have his cowboy partner. That's another one right there. In Point Break, you've got a character named War Child, and you've got several Nazis. So I think it pretty much covers the gamut of Los Angeles.
I think got them all. Yeah. I mean, Blade
It's
Runner,
a veritable melting pot.
I mean, when I leave my house, I'm right in downtown LA. Kind of looks like Blade Runner a lot of the time. It's only a slight exaggeration. The cars just aren't flying yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It opens up him eating noodles. You know what I mean? I always want noodles every time he orders those
Ooh,
noodles.
yeah.
But I think though, for me, what's interesting is Kari has brought San Francisco to the party, and Basic Instinct is dripping in California. It is dripping in San Francisco. It's not just based in the city. You've got, going across, you've got the bay, you've got all this kind of stuff, the water, you've got the house overlooking. So Kari, what do you think? You're the one that brought this in. Do you reckon there's more California to Basic Instinct than there is to Point Break? Do you reckon it can dethrone it? I'm interested in your opinion.
Well, unfortunately, someone already picked Point Break, because I would have done a Point Break Gleaming the Cube kind of duo. But since you already did Point Break, I had to find something else. And I went through my whole list of like Chinatown, and there are so many different movies. But the reason I chose Blade Runner was not because of the elements that you see Los Angeles, even though it is set in Los Angeles, but because I think San Francisco and LA and California in general are steeped in a relationship with technology that is so California. We fear it, we embrace it, we want it to be a part of our lives and make our lives easier, but we're also terrified of it taking our place. There's so much current California in Blade Runner, even though it is a dark vision of the future that is the past. This is getting very complicated even in this sentence. I really chose it because of the current climate in Los Angeles right now, that love-hate relationship with technology, with artificial intelligence, and everything that's going on now. I feel like that's the bigger conversation of what California is.
Yeah. It's very precious. You're right. Like, we need to go back to the old days of Point Break, is what you're saying. Where everyone's surfing and skydiving and just having a good time.
No one's got a cell phone.
No one's replicating each other.
I mean, I live in a city that is the beta testing ground for 3 or 4 different autonomous vehicle companies. So that, like, at night, I take a driverless car home.
Wow.
I have an app that unlocks the door. I get in, the car drives with no driver. I listen to whatever music I want. It drops me off at my home. It feels like the future.
Would you feel more comfortable if you had like some sort of Total Recall Johnny Cab?
Johnny Cab, yeah.
In the front, spinning around. Like, yeah, I mean, with that, that is terrifying just saying it out loud.
No, I am actually, I am one of the few people that I know it's not a popular opinion, but I actually love the autonomous cars that drive me home at night. I actually feel very safe with 60 cameras, LiDAR and radar that aren't texting or talking on the phone or trying to have a conversation with me. I
Right.
actually feel like their night vision is better. I actually feel totally safe in them, and I'm part of their learning experience.
Yeah.
There's a lot of AI I fear, but not the autonomous vehicles. I
This
know it's
sounds
not
like
possible.
this sounds like the opening act to a horror film, though.
It does.
I know-
Everything you're
I
saying,
know
you're
it
like, oh,
does.
I
I
trust
know it
this car
does.
with my life. And there's cameras, and
But see,
nothing could possibly happen.
it's interesting.
I know. I know it's also very, it's people are on the internet are going to probably reject this hard, but I do like the autonomous
You
vehicles.
want replicants? That's how you get replicants.
Yeah,
I
well,
know. It's
Well,
the
let's get into
beginning.
that because it's really reflecting the attitude in Basic Instinct of the fear. Because like Kari's saying is, you can also find videos on Reddit, on Twitter, whatever, of like in San Francisco, people are deliberately messing with these cars. They're putting like cones on them. They're creating situations where they start blocking the road. They're reacting against this idea of AI as well. And it's like, much like Kari, you were saying, with the writers and the actors as well, reacting against the idea that AI is going to write a script, that AI is going to be an actor. And it's like, it's the techno fear. Oh man, I was going to dismiss Blade Runner and you've sucked me back in with this one, Kari. You're so right about the time that we're living in and the fear that Blade Runner is quite prescient. All right, you made the conversation even more difficult. Now we've got 3 movies, guys. Like,
Well,
I
I mean,
don't, I don't-
California is very Point Break in its time, whereas Blade Runner almost feels very California now to me. I feel like the conversation in Blade Runner is more current for California now. I'm nostalgic for Point Break days, but I feel like we're living in Blade Runner days.
So what's
That's
interesting to me, Kari, though, is you are Miss San Francisco. That's where you live. You love San Francisco. And Basic Instinct is all San Francisco, and you haven't mentioned it in the last
we always talk about too, like, okay, for Point Break, there's no way you can take LA out of that movie. It just doesn't work. Like, would you watch a Point Break if it was set in Miami? Probably not. It just doesn't capture that feeling of that vibe in that era. And I think with, to a lesser extent, Basic Instinct, I mean, that whole thing is steeped in San Francisco. It's difficult to picture that taking place in like a Kansas or like any other place.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Blade Runner. I don't know if you can. I mean, if Blade Runner was set in like Neo Tokyo or something like that, it would still be the same kind of movie. So
True. Basic Instinct, I think that the reason I chose it is because it is very beautiful, and the Bay Area is ridiculously beautiful. San Francisco is surrounded 3 sides by water. We have the ocean and the bay, and it's in the middle of national park with mountains and cliffs and the headlands and Marin, and half of our city is a park, which is bigger. I think it's bigger than Central Park. It's a beautiful city. It's got pockets of troublesome areas, but overall this city is gorgeous, and it's hard to separate Basic Instinct from the setting that she lives in. Like being able to jump over to Stinson Beach, which is still a 45-minute drive, only because it's through windy, gorgeous roads through mountains to get to a beautiful area. Like I feel like physically Basic Instinct is very California, but mentally Blade Runner is very California.
Oh, guys, this is a great
This is
one.
the problem. When we did the first episode, we pit 3 LA movies against one another, which helped narrow it down because California is so massive. It's hard to pick 3 different movies from 3 different areas and say this one is the best for all of it. You know, that's tough.
This is why when I pitched this idea to the guys, I go, I think this is a fun idea because it's so hard to do. Yeah. But now, like I said, I thought I knew where I was going with this, but the whole Blade Runner thing that you just brought up, Kari, has really thrown me for a loop because it is like, if we're talking about the now of it all, what you said about the Point Break is the nostalgia of California. That's, of course it's nostalgia. It's the way that it taught me California as an English guy. That's what California was, but that is forever ago. That is like when I was a child, and now I've got my own children. You know, I was younger than them when I saw Point Break. Is it now Blade Runner versus Basic Instinct, guys? Like, what do you guys think? I'm completely up in the air.
I'm kind of siding with Carrie on the Blade Runner thing, just because, living here and stuff, it's very much like living in silly Blade Runner, because like instead of like replicants and all this cool stuff, you have like the Postmates robot. But it's still like, that's what I take around town. I don't order the Uber. I just order a meal home and I just sit on the Postmates robot.
The Blade Runners of the future are just going to be shooting Postmates robots for delivering to the wrong address.
Everything they introduce in Blade Runner, it's like there's a lot of things we have today that are like it, but it's all like the silly, like, tech bro version of it that looks kind of dumb. But it still exists. And, traveling in down, every time I go, just in downtown last night, it looks, it's the, the advertisements, the neon, and all that. It looks very Blade Runner. I go through Little Tokyo all the time, and you see like, those type of food carts and noodle stands and things like that.
You fire down to iWorld. Which I fucking love that the name of the store is just iWorld.
Hey man, he makes eyes. What do you want him to call it? Yeah, you should have called it the iStore. iPad.
But yeah, even like aesthetically and like the feel of it, it feels much closer to Blade Runner, like just around where I live. It's just it's kind of part of my daily life.
Okay, so I want Point Break to, in my vision, I want it to encapsulate, like that's what my vision of California is. And you're right, it's very much steeped in that time, but you're absolutely right in that Blade Runner is deeply prescient in the world we're currently living in. So I have to agree with you.
Are we going to do Blade Runner? That's okay. So
yes, because you could talk about Blade Runner for 95 more episodes. I mean, we didn't even touch it. We should have started with it, because I feel like you need to intellectually choose Blade Runner because of the themes that are running through where we are now and where we are then. I'm sorry. Point Break it's in my heart, but I'm going to say knockout.
Oh, this is why I love doing this podcast, because we always think we know where we're going to end up, and we never, like, this is, oh wait, are we doing it? Are we agreeing that we're going to pick Blade Runner?
Or am I manipulating you like Sharon Stone?
I know.
God damn it. Every time.
This is what I'm saying.
Every time.
Honestly,
I am very dumb.
God damn your feminine
Douglas.
wiles. I'm going to go shoot some tourists about
Let's get a Voight company now. I tell you, I genuinely thought Basic Instinct was going to take it walking in. But we're doing it. Okay, so we're all agreed?
I do think if we pit Basic Instinct against two other San Francisco movies, it'd be an interesting conversation too.
All right. Well, that's the thing, is because we'll get
Mrs. Doubtfire and Princess Diaries.
Oh, there you go. I was going to say Memoirs of the Invisible Man.
I love that movie. Oh, I think that's an underrated gem. Chevy Chase right there.
And just for the future, when you actually go into watching more San Francisco movies, I do want to give you a little nugget, is that our mayor, Willie Brown, would only give permits if he could do a cameo in movies that were shot in San Francisco.
What?
So it's kind of fun. He's the Stan Lee of San Francisco movies, where all of a sudden you'll be like, why is Willie Brown walking out right now?
He played Roxy in Basic Instinct. Incredible role. So quite at the absolute 11th hour, Kari Byron with the analysis of Blade Runner and our current existence in the world has managed to twist this around to Blade Runner is the official movie for California.
I feel like a turtle on my back in the desert.
Oh my God, this is awesome. All right, Blade Runner. Because
Tortoise.
now we get to talk about Blade Runner again, and you like, I better believe, Kari, you're probably gonna have to come back and talk about it some more. All right, so the official movie now for the United States of a Movie podcast that represents California until somebody comes up with a movie to dethrone it is now Blade Runner. I'm so excited about that. But one thing we also like to do, Kari, before we talk about where we're going next week, is talk about the also-rans. You did mention it, some of the ones you initially just intrigued me that your first instinct was Gleaming the Cube, and I went, I haven't seen that since I was a kid. Gleaming the Cube, what else? And what other movies that you were circling before you settled on Basic Instinct and Blade Runner?
Vertigo. obviously. I was thinking of Vertigo over Basic Instinct, but I thought Basic Instinct would be more fun because everybody's analyzed Vertigo to death. Chinatown, also very LA. There's everything Robin Williams did here. I mean, it's pretty endless. Even Matrix 4.
I just watched that again last night.
It's so funny because Karen
Ryan has
so
the
glad you
wrong
didn't pick
opinion
this.
on that movie. I have the right opinion that that movie's great.
I take the blue pill.
I love Matrix 4.
I was like, Carrie and I were sort of agreeing that it's like, I like it for the story, but I feel like they should have brought back the Hong Kong Wirework team because that was the one thing missing from
For sure.
4.
No one's picking Alcatraz?
Escape from Alcatraz.
The Rock.
Escape from Alcatraz?
The Rock!
That's it.
How did we not do The Rock?
Oh, we talked about it doing our first episode going into it. I think it was one of the first movie like all of us picked.
Yeah.
But then there's just so many.
I know.
So
That's that. God bless California for that. All right, so there it is. So we picked Blade Runner as the official. We've talked about the also rans. Guys, I was inspired this morning about where we're going to be going next week. It's an exciting one. It's going to be a good one. I think it's also going to be quite introspective. We're going to go to the state of Wyoming next week. So I see even Carrie's interested. But yeah, get your thinking caps on. Think about where or what movie you think is going to fit into Wyoming for you. I
already know what you're picking.
I think
son of a bitch.
I'll let you have it because I've got another one as well. But until then, Kari, what are you up to right now? What are you getting into? What do you want to promote while you're on the show? If anyone can wants to follow you or find you.
I don't need to self-promote. I'm here for the movies, man.
Okay, well, this is like basically you're going to become the fourth host of the show then. Yeah, you can find me online, Ollie_Pettigrew. You can also find me as That Englishman in Texas. You can find Will. He's entitled Millennial online. Ryan is a mystery person that's behind you at all times. It doesn't exist anywhere. Also, this is our first episode that is debuting on YouTube. So thank you if you're actually watching this episode. The previous 4 episodes will be getting released as the week goes on, and so we're going to start doing them at the same time. Kari, can we just say thanks so much for joining us? Thank you for bringing such great movies, but also fantastic analysis. And you have an open invite anytime you want to join us and talk movies. You are welcome because it was a treasure.
Oh, I will be coming back. Find me on the socials. How about that?
Absolutely. Find Kari Byron. Have you been unhacked on Twitter yet?
Oh my God, creepy enough. I was about to walk into the X headquarters and suddenly my account was accessible.
AI, man. The replicants, we're back to Blade Runner. We're going to have to talk about this at another time. Kari, you've been a treasure. Ryan, Will, thanks so much as always for being awesome to talk movies. I can't wait to figure out where we're going in Wyoming, but most of all, to anybody at home who's listening or watching, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the United States of a Movie podcast.